I am Dr. Shweta, and today we'll be discussing a very important topic that is taught compulsorily in all the courses of education. That's constructivism. And constructivism, this theory of learning, was given by Piaget, John Piaget. He was a Swiss psychologist and has been responsible for bringing a revolution in education and in teaching learning processes. But before we move into details of this theory, I think it's very important to understand the basic unit of this theory, which begins with understanding a schema, what a schema is. Because unless we understand what a schema is, it's very difficult to understand the processes of constructivism and how to apply it as a teacher in classrooms. So today's entire lecture will be devoted to understanding what a schema is. Well, as you can see on the board, I've just tried to draw a brain. I'm not very good at drawing, but I've just tried to depict human brain. This is the brain. Let us assume that this is the brain of a newborn child. Now, we as human beings, we have several concepts running in our head. Okay, we have several abilities, several concepts, several understanding, perceptions, assumptions, so much in our head. And all these things that we know and we do are stored as concepts in our brain. And these all concepts are schemas. But let's talk about a newborn child, a newborn baby. Does a newborn baby have empty mind? No. God has given a newborn baby some abilities to do a few things. Of course, the newborn baby will not be able to talk, will not be able to distinguish between various things, will not be able to show those higher cognitive abilities, will not be able to walk around and interact with the environment and demand or assert or do all these things, because these schemas, these concepts are not yet developed in the brain of a newborn child. But God has been very kind to give at least some schemas, some natural concepts to a newborn baby for the survival of life. So these schemas are already there. These concepts, some concepts are already there in the brain of a child when the child is born. And these concepts that are there at the time of birth are known as reflexes. So these reflexes are important for our survival. So it's not that the child's brain, the newborn baby's brain, is completely empty. It does have some naturally existing concepts or schemas when the child is born, and those are necessary for the survival of the same. So not many schemas the newborn baby would have. The newborn baby may have schemas of, that I have to cry. This is an ability. As I said, the concept may be related to an ability, or the concept may be related to something which is valuable or important. But here, in the case of a newborn baby, it is important for survival. So when a baby is born, there are already some concepts. Now, we as individuals have millions and millions of concepts, and these concepts are growing every day. Today, I will be teaching you about schemas, and that is also one concept, and that will get added to your brain. So we are continuously learning schemas, we are making schemas, we are altering schemas on a daily basis. But now let's go back to a newborn baby who has not yet received education, who has not yet interacted with environment, who does not have any ability, any schema, any concept yet in the brain. But God has given some concepts naturally in the child, so that the child is able to do at least some functions which are necessary for survival, like crying. The child will cry, the newborn baby will cry, and the parents will get a message that there's something wrong, that there's something that the baby wants. Either the baby is hungry or the baby is in pain. So these few abilities are naturally there in the child's brain when the child is born. And as the child grows older, as the child begins to interact with the environment, as the child gains more cognitive abilities, these concepts they go on growing. So initially, maybe this brain will have just one or two or three schemas or concepts, and gradually these schemas will grow into millions and millions as we go on giving the child education, experiences, etc. So gradually, as the baby begins to grow, new schemas, you can see ma, the baby begins to recognize his or her mother, father. The baby understands, I have to cry for these things, I don't have to cry for these things. So all these schemas, they go on increasing and increasing, and by the time the child is an adult, there are millions of schemas, uncountable number of schemas in the brain. So this is how the concept formation goes on happening lifelong. But How does this process actually happen? Well, Piaget says that there are two important processes responsible for growth of schemas in a human brain, and these are assimilation and accommodation. So we will try to understand what these two things are. Now, as I said, that as a child begins to grow and learn and interact with the environment, the number of schemas they go on increasing. And there are certain schemas that are present naturally at birth. The brain is never empty, but of course, learning, interaction with the environment, and all these processes they go on adding to the existing schema structure that is in the brain of the child. Now, suppose C1, C2, C3, all these schemas are already there in the brain of the child. Now, what are these schemas going to do? These schemas are concepts stored inside the brain of the child, and these are going to help the child to do or perform those actions, those abilities, okay, those things that are required. For example, there's a schema C3, and this schema is about crying. Whenever the baby is hungry, the baby would cry. So, how is this happening? There's already a crying schema in the head, in the brain of the child, which the god has gifted. It's a natural schema. We also call those natural schemas as reflexes. And when the baby has to cry or feels like crying or has to demand and yet has not learned to speak, there will be a matching between this requirement, which is crying, and the existing schema. Similarly, you must have noticed babies taking everything to their mouth. They have a habit of, you give this marker to a baby, the first thing that the baby, a month old baby would do will take it to the mouth. So this is because they already have a sucking schema. Here I have depicted the sucking schema as C2. So let us assume that C2, the already existing schema or concept in the brain of the child, is C2, which relates to sucking. It's a sucking schema. So C2 is a sucking schema which is already there in the child's brain. And as soon as we give an object, edible, non-edible, this matching takes place. The child matches this schema with the action that has to be performed, and this matching happens and the action is performed. So existing schemas actually help the child to match and perform that ability, and this process is called assimilation. So assimilation is basically matching of any activity, any ability with these schemas that are already existing in the brain of the child. So this process is called assimilation. Now, suppose I give that child a bottle to hold. Now, the child does not know how to hold the bottle and drink. The child only knows to suck. And this is something new for the child. And there is no schema for holding. Now, what will the child do? The child will try to develop that schema. Will do. There are several theories how the child would do that, but then the ultimate aim will be to create this new schema which was not there in the child's brain. The child's brain had the sucking schema, so whenever there was an object, the child matched it with that ability of sucking and was sucking it. But now we have given the child something new, and that requires not sucking, but that requires holding. So how will the child do that? Because there is no schema for holding. The child will develop this schema, and this process of developing this new schema is known as accommodation. The child will either develop this new schema or will alter this sucking schema so that it can do both sucking and holding. So this creation of new schema to adjust to a new requirement, a new ability to perform a new task, or this modification in the existing schema, or adding a new schema to the already existing set of schemas is called accommodation. I'll repeat once again. There are several schemas in the brain of a child, and the child is constantly matching those schemas with whatever actions the child has to do. When there is already an existing schema, whether it is crying, whether it is identifying a mother, whether it is holding something, sucking something, crying, whatever it is, the child already has those concepts in the brain and is simply matching the requirement with those schemas and performing that action. It's very simple. मेरे brain के अंदर वो schemas हैं और मुझे कुछ करना है, वो match हो गया, मैंने कर दिया, लेकिन कुछ नया आ गया. something new comes in which is not there. The concept of that thing, that ability is not there in my brain. So my brain will work in a way to create that concept so that that matching can take place now. So creating that new schema or adjusting or modifying the existing schema, जो पुराने schemas है उसमें change करूं या मैं नया schema लाऊं, that is called accommodation. So this process of assimilation and accommodation goes on happening continuously. Now there are many influences, many external influences that encourage assimilation and accommodation. वो learning है, वो हम बाद में सीखेंगे कि कैसे करना है. बट ये होता क्या है कि हमारे ब्रेन में ऑलरेडी स्कीमास हैं जो बाहर की दुनिया में जो भी हमें करना है उसको मैच कर रहे हैं. और अगर कोई स्कीमा नहीं है और उसकी ज़रूरत है क्योंकि हमें कुछ नया काम करना है और उसका स्कीमा नहीं है, तो our brain will develop those new schemas or will modify the existing schemas and then matching will happen. तो या तो ऑलरेडी जो है उनसे मैचिंग हो गई और जो नहीं है उनको हमने क्रिएट किया. फिर उसमें अगर ये स्कीमा आ जाता है, दिस स्कीमा इज फॉर होल्डिंग. अब अगर उसको हम बॉटल दें तो उसके दिमाग में अकोमोडेशन के बाद वो स्कीमा आ गया है एंड अगेन matching is possible and the baby is able to hold the bottle this time, not just suck it. So this is how we continuously go on developing our schemas or concepts in the brain by process of assimilation and accommodation. Accommodation is very important. Accommodation से ही हमें new schemas मिलेंगे और फिर हम उनको match करेंगे और नए कामों को कर पाते हैं. So matching is assimilation. Incorporation of a new schema is accommodation. एंड ये एसिमिलेशन और अकोमोडेशन लाइफ भर होता रहता है. आज मैंने आपको ये कॉन्सेप्ट पढ़ाया स्कीमा. लेट अस अज्यूम कि आपको ये चीज़ बिल्कुल भी नहीं आती थी, तो आपके दिमाग में स्कीमा का स्कीमा नहीं था. तो आपको अगर मैंने कोई क्वेश्चन दे दिया होता, व्हाट इज अ स्कीमा, मैच नहीं कर पाते आप उसको नहीं लिख पाते. लेकिन नाउ आई हैव ऑल्टर्ड योर ब्रेन स्ट्रक्चर, आई हैव गिवन यू अ कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ स्कीमा. नाउ यू हैव अ स्कीमा ऑफ स्कीमा एंड दिस accommodation has happened. Assimilation नहीं हो पाया, मैच नहीं हो पाया क्योंकि स्कीमा का ही स्कीमा नहीं था. तो आप वो एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन अटेम्प्ट नहीं कर सकते थे. बट नाउ आई हैव अकोमोडेटेड अ स्कीमा ऑफ स्कीमा. Now you can attempt the question of schema, you can match. So this is how you have learned the schema of schema. This is just an example. तो पियाजे की जो थ्योरी है वो कंस्ट्रक्टिविज्म, स्कीमास को कैसे डेवलप करना है, कैसे एसिमिलेशन और अकोमोडेशन करना है कि न्यू नॉलेज हम बच्चे को कंटिन्यूसली देते जाएं. ऑफ कोर्स अ चाइल्ड इज लर्निंग ऑन हिज और हर ओन. वो खुद भी बहुत सारे स्कीमास बना रहा है. एसिमिलेशन अकोमोडेशन इज हैपनिंग नेचुरली, बट हमें इस प्रोसेस को कैसे फैसिलिटेट करना है वो ज़रूरी है टू लर्न एज टीचर्स. So that I'll be taking up in the next video. So for today, I think it's very important that we know what a schema is. Thank you.